Today's story is another encounter in this series, Seeing is Believing. My friend Jordan, who's an author, has written many books, and one of those is his new book that's out called Seeing is Believing. Hence why this new series is called Seeing is Believing. And in this book, he gives many strange and terrifying encounters that he had personally had over the years. After reading a couple stories from his book, I reached out to him to see if I could tell some of his stories from his book on my channel, and he agreed and thought it was a great idea. I will not be telling all of his stories, so you will have to go read the rest for yourself. I will say that there are some really good and interesting stories that I will not put on this channel that he has written of his own encounters. I will leave a link below so that you can check it out after this story. Jordan has had a lot of strange and unique experiences over the years, and this experience he had will make you more cautious the next time you go camping or hiking in the woods. This story is what Jordan claims to be an encounter with some type of creature or possibly a real-life Bigfoot. If you know Jordan, you will know that he's not the type of person to just make up stories for attention. He just simply wants to tell people about his unusual and supernatural encounters. This was not just a sighting, but more of an interaction, from being followed to things being thrown with such force that no human could possibly do, and screams that came from the woods that would make any human being think twice before going back into the woods. Hi, I'm Zach, and welcome to Rooted Expeditions. Hit that thumbs up and let's dive right into this terrifying experience. In 2017, Jordan decided to go vamping in a national state park, but he didn't want to go where all the campsites were and that where all these people were. He wanted to go to a more secluded part of the park. This section of the park was mainly for horseback riders and other campers who wanted to be in a more secluded part of the forest and away from the regular campsites that the majority of people would go to. Now, if you didn't know what vamping was, it's camping, but instead of using your tent to camp in, you use your van, which Jordan did this quite often. He had bought a minivan and converted it into this stealth camper. It was equipped with a GPS, Wi-Fi, and all the supplies you would need for a trip like this one. So Jordan would drive in and around this park looking for different spots to set up his camp. See, when Jordan would go on these adventures or these camping trips, he didn't like being close to the people. He wanted to feel the whole experience in the wilderness alone and away from the people that might be in the area. So he would drive around till he was off the beaten path and away from anyone that could disrupt his adventure. When he found the spot he liked, he would stop and set up his campsite and get ready and prepare all his gear and supplies that he would need for that day. He had spent about 2 days hiking through some heavily forest trails in this park. Before we go deeper into this story, I must point out that as Jordan was hiking through the forest the past 2 days, there was something that really stood out to him. And what that was is that he really didn't see any animals moving around the wooded forest as he normally would on his hikes and camping trips. And along that, he didn't even run into any dead animals either. And Jordan would point out that this was very strange and unusual, as this never really happened to him before. The next day, Jordan decided he would stay out longer, so he moved deeper into the park, even further away from anyone else that could have been in this area or in that area. But first, he needed to run to the nearest town so that he could get some more supplies to stay out longer. Now, this is where things seem to take a different turn for Jordan. What he would experience next would be something he just wasn't prepared for. As Jordan was driving to the store to get supplies, he was driving down this windy road that was surrounded by the forest. He says he remembers this, and this was the moment he would never forget. He was coming around this corner on this stretch of this road, and as he was driving, he was on the phone with his wife and playing with the GPS at the same time. I'm guessing trying to find the best route to get to this store so he could get his supplies and that he needed and get back to the campsite. As soon as he was checking his mirrors, as we should all do when we drive, that's when he noticed something strange out of the window. He caught a glimpse of something on a hillside as he was driving by. It had to have been at least 2 days without seeing any animals or any life at all, and he wanted to see what this thing could be. Now, as soon as he was looking at what was standing there on the hillside, which the hillside was pretty much a wide open landscape area for about 50 to 100 yards until it reached the tree line. There it was, this thing that could only be described as a Sasquatch, or what I like to call them, wood boogers, standing there on the hillside. With that being said, this creature was about 50 yards away from him, and this thing was tall. In fact, this thing was very huge, very muscular, and covered completely head to toe in long, dark hair. Jordan would say this was just like the stories he has heard in the past, but not bulky like a gorilla, more like an extremely tall and well-built man. As this was happening, he did a double take over his shoulder, and this image was just seared into his brain of this creature standing on the hillside. He was trying to rationalize the situation and what he just saw. As he was on the phone with his wife, he told her, wow, someone put a Sasquatch statue on this hill. And as soon as he said that, he realized how stupid that even sounded. So as he was trying to rationalize what he just saw, saying it was a statue, but he remembers seeing this creature's hair blowing in the wind. Jordan spent a lot of his time in the woods alone for weeks on end and never saw anything like this before. He just thought that all the stories that he heard about Bigfoot in the past were made up or had a really good explanation behind them. Now, I will say, Jordan has had some very strange and crazy stuff happen to him, but a wood booger in the woods is something he was not expecting. Jordan got to the store and got all the supplies he needed and headed back to the spot he found deep in the park. He tried to forget what he saw, but it was an image he just couldn't get rid of. So he decided to go explore the woods and find out some answers, or get some answers to what he just saw. He found this creek bed and tried to follow it, looking for patches of fur to see, or I guess confirm, what he saw earlier was real. He did find some curious and unusual trails, but wasn't able to find any hard evidence that something big was in that area. So after searching for a bit, he headed back to his campsite. The next day, Jordan decided to stick around camp instead of going out, so he just relaxed around camp. Now, this is where things seemed to take a different turn. Jordan was laying in his van, just relaxing and kind of bummed out that he wasn't able to find any clues leading to what he saw the day before. So as he was laying there in the van, just relaxing, he could hear this tapping sound or this clunking sound keep hitting the van, as maybe nuts were falling from the tree that was above the van. But he was able to quickly realize that they weren't falling out of the tree. In fact, they were hitting the side of the van instead of the top. Someone or something must have been throwing them at the van. And as soon as he realized this, shivers ran up and down his spine. His hair stood up and goosebumps all over his body. Then he remembered the creature or thing that he saw on the hillside as he was driving on that road. He sat up immediately, no longer feeling secure in his van. He got out of his van, and right next to his van was this oak tree. And as soon as he stepped out of the van, this walnut or rock came hurling through the forest and smashed into this tree that was right next to his van, making a loud sound. Now, this object hit this tree so hard that it bounced off the tree, and after hitting the tree, it bounced another 25 feet before hitting the ground, and then proceeded to roll another 50 feet before stopping. As soon as this happened, in shock, Jordan looked around, and of course, there was no one there. Now, Jordan would claim and say that he was the only one out there for miles. There was no one around that could have done this, because he would have been able to see someone or at least hear them walking or running through the woods. He got to thinking, when that object hit that tree, that object could have easily hit his head. This object could have hurt him, in fact. Jordan would say that he wasn't the brightest crown in the box, but it wouldn't take a genius to figure out what happened, or maybe it did. His first thought was to run right into the woods in the same direction that those rocks or walnuts were being thrown, and search for who or what thrown these objects. Jordan wasn't the type of person to shield away or back away from an opportunity like this one. He wanted to get down to the bottom of what happened or what this could be. So he grabbed his 5-foot staff and ran into the woods, and he ran around for a bit trying to find what this thing could be or who was messing with him. But as he looked, he didn't see anything or anyone. He did state that he looked everywhere, but never did he once look up into the trees. Now, just when you thought it was over, nope, think again. What happened next is a truly terrifying experience. After searching and not finding anything, Jordan slept in his van that night, locked the doors, and armed himself, not knowing what could happen. The next morning, Jordan woke up and had some coffee that he had heated up over the fire pit that he had there at the campsite, and he was outside, standing near the tree line, stretching and drinking his coffee. And he could hear a car starting up from a distance, but from the sound of it, had to be at least a mile or so down the road. And when this car started up, you could tell that it was starting to make its way towards him. You could hear this car getting closer and closer as it moved along this dirt road. And so Jordan just standing there on the tree line, observing the sounds that are happening around him. Then, all of a sudden, two distinct noises began almost simultaneously. And then, within a split second, a third noise added onto this strange symphony of sounds. And Jordan standing there kind of in shock and trying to take everything in, like, what is going on? And it was almost like it was a dream, but it wasn't. The first sound was not really strange, but downright frightening. It was a half yell, half scream type of sound, almost like a half human and half animal type scream. And whatever this thing was, sounded like it was pissed off. This thing screamed or shouted 3 times really loud. It was just so loud that it sent shivers down his spine, and Jordan was entirely by himself at this time. As these creatures were talking, or should I say screaming to each other, Jordan said that he could hear what sounded like a drum beating in the distance that was deep in the forest. Yeah, that's right, a drum, and it even had a rhythm to it, just like a Native American tribal drum sound that he would describe, and it sounded clear as day to him. Then he could hear several large branches breaking from every direction, and these weren't small branches, these were like massive logs breaking and snapping in the forest all around. Then he could hear heavy movement in the woods, and what sounded like all this movement that was in the woods was heading in the same direction, and the noise started to fade out. At the same time, the car was about a quarter mile away from him, and then all of a sudden the drumming and branches snapping and cracking in the forest just stopped. Maybe this thing or this scream was a communication that called these creatures together to leave the area. And from what Jordan said, there had to be several of these things in the woods. And the more that Jordan started to think about this, he realized that these things were right near his campsite this whole time. Were they following him while he was walking or hiking? Were they watching him or observing him? Were they following him while he was hiking? After this happened, he walked up to where he thought these screams were coming from, but whatever was there was gone now. Now, this might not sound scary to some people, but being there and experiencing something like that would make anyone feel small compared to what force was in those woods, moving like it did with great speed and very agile as it moved through the trees. If you like this story and want more details or more stories like this one, you can check out Jordan Tyler Quinn Farkas's book called Seeing is Believing. That does it for today's video. Hit that thumbs up. Peace, I love you, and as always, God bless.